Good evening. Let's start the OTAKING seminar. Today is January 13th. This will be the second lecture in January. Maybe you can guess how I'm going to start with this on the table. This is a rubber-driven multiplane cell of Ohm. I showed you for the first time in the last lecture. But in that time, I didn't get to show you the backside. It'll be difficult to understand how it works if you don't see the back. Maybe I talked enough about this in the last lecture, but I reassembled it anyway, so let's check this out. This side I showed in the last lecture. It's currently backed by this brown paint, or a blindfold board. Without it, you get a transparent cell. Like this. Which was quite easy to tell, I guess. I'll put this back on for safety. In this overall structure, this is the rubber-driven multiplane part, as I told you in the last lecture. So the multiplane processing is activated by rubber and works like this. Now I'll show you the mechanism. I'll put this down. I can't be too careful, it's never easy. Now you see, this is the backside of the cell. These small white blocks that you see here are guides. These linear ones are rails. They're both made of some kind of paper, maybe cardboard, so the rails slide between these paper guides. This white plate-like part, this is made of rubber. So the mechanism works like this. Oops, it's displaced. It's so easily displaced. So it moves like this. Nicely made, isn't it? So the cells are connected to each other only in this part and only by means of this rubber piece. So the movement is actually made by the rails sliding on these guides. Phew! I suppose you understood it. Okay, I'll flip this back. So, that was the mechanism. In the actual shooting, they pulled it little by little bit, one cut at a time. They were shooting animation, so they couldn't shoot all the action at once, like they do in special effects movies. Instead, they actually pulled it a little bit for each cut. They did the pulling by referring to a scale on the guide, which marks at a 0 point. I suppose it was about 0.5 millimeter intervals. So, I guess we're done with this. Okay. Now, for today, I'm going to... Oh god, I was so nervous. Here you go. I told you that I would like to talk about the Whisper of the Heart and what I left behind for Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I think the weight will be like 90% Nausicaa and 10% Whisper. I do have a good reason for this. I mean, how can I say this? There's something about Whisper of the Heart that I don't fully appreciate, which makes it difficult for me to talk about it forever like Nausicaa. On top of that, the story was first published as a girls' manga, which I won't say that I'm unfamiliar with it, but yet I feel disconnected. Still, when I see it as Miyazaki's work, I mean, despite the fact that Whisper of the Heart is generally deemed as Kondo's work, when I see it as Miyazaki's work, there are some interesting points. So you see, it's a little twisted, and that's why I should spend only a limited time. So let's start from Buddha Nausicaa, or Nausicaa Wanderbout, and I will pick it up from where I left off. This is a map around the Valley of the Wind in Nausicaa that we used in the last lecture. The first part of the story mainly takes place in this area. So here you see that the acid sea and the toxic jungle are over there. This land is about 1,000 meters above the sea level. So there's a huge difference in altitude between here and the sea. From this land with an altitude of 1,000 meters, a thin valley meanders down between the canyons. And there is the castle here. The village is located at a higher altitude than the castle. Geographically, the castle is at a relatively low altitude, and the field is at an even lower altitude. That was the overview of the map. The Tolmekian ship, the airship carrying the giant warrior, crashes around this point. Then, After that, Tolmekian battleships fly in, but they fly down through the valley right here, which makes it quite a malicious invasion. If they came from this side, villagers would have been able to see them coming. Moreover, if they came from the seaside, they would not bring the spores from the toxic jungle, so it's safer. However, they decide to come down from the toxic jungle side, bringing the spores with them, down into the valley to suddenly appear. They make a forced landing at a point before the castle in the central area of the village. And one ship flies to the castle to take control over the area. Meanwhile, Nausicaa and others were working around the crashing site. So they look up and suddenly find that the Tolmekian battleship has already entered their village. So it was a nasty invasion by the Tolmekians, taking a geographical advantage. I guess now you understand why Nausicaa was so mad. If they wanted to play fair, they would have come from the sea. Instead, they decide to fly through the valley and make a forced landing, and that is nasty. After that, in the village seized by the Tolmekians, an egg or a pupa of the giant warrior is carried from the crashing point to the castle through the field. The carrying is done by pulling up because this part is a gentle slope, so they have to pull the egg up along the slope. During the absence of Nausicaa and others, in the village, villagers find that toxic spores have infested the field. Obaba says, "We have no choice but to burn down this forest," and they say that the trees protected the water for the village. Specifically, the forest in the field and a vineyard in this area close to the reservoir are infected. So the villagers go to the castle and request Tolmekians to borrow their burning equipment, their flamethrowers. The villagers get what they want and start burning the trees. Enraged that they have had to burn their forest, the villagers revolt and attack the castle. They were working in the vineyard and descended the slope to make the attack. So the Tolmekians in the castle are only able to defend themselves from the surprise attack. The citizens make the attack from the higher position, using it to their advantage in the battle. Eventually, Tolmekian soldiers fight back, forcing the villagers to retreat up the valley. Remember the cliff road Yupa took for a while to pass in the severe sandstorm in the opening scene? Well, the villagers are now forced to move up that road again this way. They come to this desert, past the insect-repelling towers, and flee to the spaceship to face the Tolmekians. Like this, there is so much you can understand about the situation when you draw a map. This tells us how desperate the villagers' attack is. I mean, because they are attacking the castle from the higher side of the valley, when they have to withdraw, they have to climb up the valley past this reservoir. They're forced to climb through the village where they live, which is a safe area protected by the wind from the valley, and trek this dangerous zone polluted by the sand with the spores. And the spaceship is only place they can flee to. So a slight change in wind direction during their withdrawal could be fatal. The map tells us about such a fatal risk, and that they are really fighting for their lives. So, like I said before, the map makes it so much easier to understand the situation. In the climax scene, the herd of Olms appears from the toxic jungle and marches through the acid sea. The lake is 100 kilometers in diameter, so it's actually a much larger sea of acid, and they come from this side. On the other hand, the giant warrior awakened moves up all the way through this valley over this sand hill of the desert with the insect-repelling towers and arrives at this position, which I think is the highest altitude to face the Olms. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is relatively simple in terms of positional relationship.